We started working on the wind turbine with the objective to democratize the access to energy. We know that we have two options, to be a niche product or to change the industry. And if you want to change an industry, you have to know the name of the game. And in the energy, it's cost per kilowatt hour.
The startup investment landscape is changing, and world-class companies are being built outside of Silicon Valley. We find them, talk with them, and discuss the upside of investing in them. Welcome to Upside.
Woo!
Hello, and welcome to the Upside Podcast, the first podcast finding upside outside of Silicon Valley. I'm Eric Hornung, and I'm accompanied by my co-host, Mr. New Gear himself, Jay Klaus. Jay, how's it going?
I think we're both Mr. New Gear themselves.
Right, but that's not how the intro goes, so that would have been pretty awkward. Misters New Gear themselves, Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus?
Yeah.
That's what you wanted?
Yeah, excited. If you guys are feeling the sultry tones of these microphones, let us know. Tweet at us at Upside FM. Tell us, I like the new Shure microphones, because we got a whole new live...
That's what you want them to tweet? You want them to say that whole sentence? Just be like, I like the new mics.
Yeah, and remember, if you guys want merch, make sure you tweet, I want merch. But yeah, whole new live podcasting setup here with a new Zoom H6 handy recorder. We have 4 Shure microphones. We're really leveling up here, Eric.
I think we sound great.
We always do.
Regardless of what microphone's in front of us, but these ones make us sound extra great.
Yeah, we always sounded great. The recording has its limitations as far as technology will go, but live in person, when you talk to Eric and I, you just notice that we sound great.
That's the first thing you notice when you see someone in person. You say, wow, look at that human being who isn't talking. They sound great.
I'm excited about it, though. It's nice. It works out real smooth. Hopefully, we get more excuses to use it, even though we do this mostly remotely. Eric and I are in different cities, as you probably know as a listener to the show. But real nice setup. It's real clean. Good-looking mics.
Low-key, I prefer the live podcast experience, the in-person podcast experience, to the remote experience.
Why is that low-key? That doesn't need to be low-key.
High-key, I prefer the live or in-person podcast experience to the remote experience.
Yeah. The bigger limiting factor is that we interview founders from all over. So it's not even just us being in the same room. It brings something special when we can sit here with the founder, just kick it around.
I agree. I mean, Skype does a lot of it, but there's just something to be said for sitting in the same room. I think that people are just more open as well.
I think we have a softer presence in person.
You think we have a hard presence remotely?
No, it's not. It's not hard or soft. It's just relatively softer in person.
So what's our default?
I think it's because people assume you're much taller when they see you online.
You think this is a me thing? You think it's my fault that guests are not as open?
I've had a lot of guests tell me off air, I thought Eric was taller.
Why did they do it off air? Why is that an insult to me?
It's because I'm making it up. Speaking of air, Eric. Today we're talking about the movement of air.
We are talking about the movement of air and how it generates electricity.
Today we're talking with Ignacio Juarez, the founder and CEO of Semtive. Semtive is a clean energy startup that was born in Argentina, spent some time in Sunnyvale, and is now in Austin, Texas. Semtive's belief and vision is that access to clean energy should be effortless and affordable. And in order to achieve that, the company developed Nemoi, a vertical axis wind turbine designed to work at a very low wind speed, making it ideal for commercial and residential use in urban and suburban areas.
This interview, I think, is going to be electric. Yes, Jay, I brought the pun, and that is something we do a lot here on Upside. Something we don't do a lot here on Upside is talk to founders who have even the slightest inkling of a Silicon Valley presence.
That's true. Yeah, this is almost off-brand for us, but I'm going to allow it. And I think it'll give us some good insight here, from somebody that was in the Valley and now has moved out of the Valley. I'm sure he has reasons why, and we should talk about that.
I agree. I think if it was the other way, it would feel very off-brand, but this is a immigrant founder who came to Silicon Valley and then left and came to a different city in the United States.
I like learning about hardware. I'm sure this has been an R&D intensive journey. The company was founded in 2009, and they've raised $3.9 million to this point.
Let's bring in Kevin Kinross, a partner at Taft, Stettinius & Hollister, to teach us about forming a company. Taft is a full-service law firm known for assisting entrepreneurs across the heartland. As a reminder, the following remarks by Taft attorneys are for informational purposes only and are not legal advice. This information is not intended to create, and receipt of it does not constitute an attorney-client relationship. No person or organization should act upon this information without first seeking professional counsel. Kevin, how's it going? Thanks for coming on. How's your day going?
It's going great. Thanks for having me on. It's fun to take a little break from the norms to participate on your show.
I can't imagine a better lunch break than recording some of this. Kevin, we've heard that in the world of startups, you should either incorporate in Delaware or your home state. Is Delaware really where I need to incorporate? And if a founder wants her company to be a Delaware company, does she physically have to be present there to reap the benefit?
What your initial state of incorporation is can be changed. And as you look to where you should form your corporation, a number of factors come in, including what your future growth plans look like and what your future need for additional capital may be with either your initial funding or your Series A round. The investors with who are providing that funding could require you to redomesticate your company to Delaware. So in some eyes, it does make sense to start off in Delaware. But it doesn't necessarily mean you need to do that. Just recognizing and assuming that when that next round of funding comes in, you very likely may have to redomesticate. And this also applies to if you are a LLC. We're talking about C corporations. The reason why individuals really do push towards Delaware is primarily three. The first one is the well-established chancery court. The Delaware court system provides a jury-free court system, at least for complex business matters that come in at the chancery court level with judges that are well-versed on these matters. The second one is the flexibility that it provides for your composition of your board of directors. And finally, a lot of the investors we're dealing with already have their investment documents that they're going to be providing to you drafted under Delaware law. And they're going to want to not reinvent the wheel just for your financing. Regardless of whether you're in Delaware, Ohio, or some other state, you're not required to have a physical presence there. Unless you're a regulated entity that may require it under those statutes. You're not required to have a physical presence. You are required to have a statutory agent. And just to kind of tie it up in a bow from my very first sentence, these are things that can be changed.
Awesome. And if people want to learn more about Taft or yourself, where should they go?
TaftLaw.com.
Ignacio, welcome to the show.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
We like to start on Upside with a background of our guest. Can you tell us about the history of Ignacio?
Everything started in 1981 when I was
Take us all the way back.
Yeah. Well, I a college dropout, first of all, right? I studied a lot of engineering. I went to 3 different universities. Basically, I started working on R&D and industrial development, business development for large corporations in the engineering department. That's how my thing started. My father was an Air Force pilot. So since my very beginnings, I was amazed by aerodynamics and engines and that kind of things. I was playing with airplanes since I was really young. That's how I get my interest about these kind of things with air and wings.
Where are you from originally?
I'm originally from Buenos Aires, Argentina.
Okay.
I'm a real porteño guy. So from South America. Now we have the Pope, the Queen of Netherlands, Messi, and myself. So I'm really proud about it.
And you go by Nacho, not Ignacio.
I'm Nacho, yeah.
We introduced you as Ignacio, but got to be formal up front, but now we're Nacho.
Nacho, yeah.
Okay, good.
Okay.
Why 3 universities? Why'd you jump around so much?
I don't know if I was the one jumping. Probably they invited me to jump. So it was not my decision. I was working in a corporation in the engineering department and learning a lot. Sometimes, you realize that things are not exactly how people is telling you. And I want to learn things by myself. With this background I had, a lot of people that support me. My father, his boss at that moment, that also tried to teach me a lot of things, and those people made me push my professors a little bit harder. I was a kind of a pain for my teachers and my
So you were pushing your
other
professors
students.
so hard that they told you to leave the school? Is that what I'm getting out of this?
They invited me to leave. Yeah. It's not that they reject me, but they said, well, I'm here now.
Yeah.
So
When did you come to the United States?
in Actually, the story of Semtive began in Argentina in 2009 when we started trying to figure out how we can generate better clean power. Right now, after some years, we developed a wind turbine after some years of R&D. But to United States, basically, we were working from Argentina. At that moment, Argentina was not the best place to do business. And we were lucky to meet a great group of people that support us, investors, co-founders of large companies in Argentina, people that are advisors mostly. They used to work for large corporations too in the United States and Brazil. And they show us that the main industry for our product was United States. So they introduced us to some people that help us with the soft landing here in the United States. So in 2015, we raised some money. I spoke with my girlfriend at that moment. I said, we have to move to the United States in 2 months. So
interesting conversation.
Let's do it. Yeah, it was Joe. Today is my wife. And actually, she's also the COO at the company.
You said it wasn't a good time to be starting a company in Argentina. And maybe I'm not familiar, but wasn't there an Argentinian depression in like 2000 or so?
Was not like that.
Okay, so
we have crises every day. So we are used to that kind of things. That make us stronger. Actually, I think that that's a really good thing for everybody in Argentina, that you know how to deal with everything, right?
You live in constant chaos.
Exactly.
Okay.
So actually, when you have some norm and everything is steady, you don't know what to do and you get bored about that. So you need some chaos. Was not good for a lot of different reasons. We have a protectionist government that they don't allow you to get technology into Argentina. So we were developing a hardware. We need a lot of things from abroad. Today, even in US, we have to buy things from abroad. It's a globalized market. Right? Was tough to do that. You were not able to access to dollars. Regulations for hiring employees is also very bad for startups. So was not a good moment there. We were willing to grow the company from there. We have some customers in the government, but in the city government, not in the national one. And it was tough to try to deal with that.
What made you want to start a company?
First of all, I had something like, the same thing that happened with my teachers happens with my bosses, right? They mostly invite me to find another job. I was always pushing them to, what else we can do? I don't like to have a boss, right? I love to have mentors and people that guide me. Actually, one of my first bosses is a guy that opens me a lot of doors mentally, right? Not real ones with intros, but that push me to move forward. Also, I have passion. I was passionate about clean energy. I always was dreaming to have my own company. I have some companies before that, before Semtive. I was doing some things about HVAC, refrigeration, and consultancy things. But actually, I used to be a wine broker too. So
what do you think about this wine? Have you heard of it?
It's Argentinian.
No, it's
That's
Australian.
all I have to say.
Is the
I want to confirm the thing that people said about the Argentinians. That's true. We are the best. So
best food, best people, best wine? Is that how it works?
Yeah, best soccer players.
So you're not a Ronaldo fan? Is that what I should take out of this?
Ronaldo is a good guy. Yeah, we like him.
When I lived in Shanghai, the World Cup was going on, and one of our buddies in our group was Argentinian. So no matter what time Argentina was playing, we were at a bar watching.
Yeah.
So we would go to Argentina bars or Argentinian supporter bars, and the whole place would be Argentina, and then just me and a couple other guys that we were with, and it was crazy. It's the like that, level of excitement and like passion. Like it was crazy in a way that not like American football is, where in Cleveland, like you go crazy at the bar and you're going wild, but like at these bars, it was silent, which was just weird. Very weird experience.
I don't understand when you get work done. You're at bars, you're trying new wines, you're in Puerto Rico.
It seems like everything just always comes back to me, Jay.
learning about the culture.
Yeah, and we're learning about each other. So what was it about that time in Argentina that made you want to get into clean energy?
Well, something was happening, right? We want to do something. As I said, I was passionate about clean energy. I was willing to do something for the environment and really do something that means, right? Not just recycle my trash or things like that. I want to do something. I know that I was able to do something for the energy, and I was always said, energy is the larger industry in the world, so why not trying to do something if you want to really have impact? Why not to do something with the larger possible scale? So we said, we're two guys from Argentina. Will be tough? No, will be almost impossible. So okay, let's do it. And we start there with the government at the beginning. Our first goal was to distribute units from other countries. We start doing some research about what we can sell, solar panels, wind turbines, controllers, things like that. First thing that we realized was that in Argentina we were not able to import goods. So we said, done, we can't sell anything. And as soon as I realized that, I said, why, if we are able to manufacture something better, instead of buying things from abroad, why we don't do something that we can sell to everybody? My partner at that moment was a financial guy, and he said, okay, do it. If you think that you can do it, let's try to do it. And the same day, I took some toilet paper cardboard and some magnets. I opened a transformer, used the wiring there, and we created the first prototype of the turbine the same day. I have a picture of that. I'll share that with you. So,
Can you share that with us? I would love to put that in the show notes.
You don't have to do it now, but I'm here for it.
why not? I say that I have one, I will do it. So.
Toilet paper,
Yep.
cardboard, some wires from a box around your house, and you just made a wind turbine.
This was the first turbine.
We're looking at a photo on Nacho's phone here
Probably
of
I
the
have my
turbine.
sleepers on in the picture. I was at home. So
Was this functional, or is this just like a
it was-
design
it's
prototype?
Actually, you have a voltmeter there.
Wow.
We were using that to measure.
And this is time-stamped June 21st, 2009. My question was going to be, so my research showed that this was started in 2009.
Yeah.
You moved to the United States and you said like 2015?
2016.
2016? So what were you doing for
January
those?
10th.
What were you doing from the time of you having a toilet paper roll prototype to moving to the United States in 2016?
First of all, it took 4 years to develop a product. Basically, bootstrapping.
Yeah.
We never had millions of dollars to invest in our company, so we had to be really smart about how we use our proceeds. In a difficult environment, it was difficult to raise money too. For us, it was huge to get in touch with those people that were really able to help us, right? With money and with advices at that moment that allowed us to go on growing. But we met those guys probably, I think that was 2014, late 2014 or early 2015. In the middle, we were trying to raise money, survive, being helped by our parents, our girlfriends at that moment, and trying to develop this product, right? Having something that we can mass produce.
What's the process like to move to the United States from Argentina?
Tough, really. But the good thing is that we never thought about that. We said we have to do it. During probably 6 months to a year, I was flying from Argentina to San Francisco once a month or so. And it's a 27 hours flight.
Yeah, I was going to say that's not a cheap flight, not an easy flight.
It's not easy at all. I used to love airplanes. I don't know why now I'm scared of them. Probably
You're scared of flying in an airplane?
Yeah.
Really?
I love airplanes.
Your dad was in the Air Force.
I used to play with airplanes, yeah. I think that I get my first flight when I was 3 months or so. I love them. I know that they're safe, everything about it. I don't know, the whole thing.
This is in the weeds, but when you're flying that often to San Francisco, do you just need a passport? Is that all you need to get
No,
in at that
actually
time?
from Argentina we need a visa. We used to have only a passport thing, but after these governments that were populist governments on 9/11, we were required to have a visa from there, and it's a tourist visa.
And then,
so at the beginning, when we decided to move here, of course, everything have to be within the law. So we have to apply for a visa. Good thing is that in Argentina, the former ambassador was really close to renewable energies. So I was invited to a lot of events when he was there. We were spoken together about clean energy, what they were doing in California and the future of clean energy. So we present all the paperwork here, and for United States, something that is strategic. So they grant me easily with my documents.
How long did it take, and what did you have to do to be taken seriously, starting from like literally a paper towel or a toilet paper roll? What level of technology did you get to before the ambassador was like, you guys got to meet Nacho, he's legitimate, he's going to change renewable energy?
Well, some people still don't take me seriously, right? So I can't say you what is needed. I think that, first of all, have to be believers. For me, it's really important to deliver, right? I try to commit with something and show them that I'm doing that. Not only presenting paperwork and going around, I try to execute. We are here disrupting an industry. We have a really long-term vision. I have a vision of the company for 50 years, but I know what I have to do today to achieve that vision, right? It's not only a PowerPoint for long-term things. It's today we have to do this, otherwise we'll never achieve that. And I proved that to my investors. I'm still with my first investor, talking with them every day if it's needed. I know that they are backing me up. Some of them have no more money to invest in the company, but they are still there trying to get in touch when I travel to Argentina or I call them, or they are always there, right?
Who was the first person that invested in you in the United States?
Well, probably it's an institution that helped us to move here. It's called Singularity University.
Peter Diamandis' thing?
Yeah, actually Rob Nail and Pascal Finet was the first American company. Then we have an investor here from Austin called Falcon Ventures. Those were the first ones. And everything started with a chain of people in Latin America too, right?
Right.
We were introduced to Marcos Galperin by a friend of mine. This guy owns Mercado Libre, this is a company in Latin America there. He introduced us to Ignacio Peña, that's another Nacho, that he introduced us to the guys at Singularity, and he introduced me to other guys, so they were really huge people for us that helped us a lot.
When you moved from Argentina, did you move to Silicon Valley or did you move to Austin?
To Silicon Valley, straight ahead to Sunnyvale, California.
Was that a requirement by Singularity?
Not at all, but we have all the contacts there. And for the renewable energy industry at the moment, you have Tesla, Sunrun, SunPower, all of them 3 miles away. So it was a kind of place to be for the renewable energy.
What was the state of the product when you moved here?
We have the third generation of the product. We were that in Argentina. Just to give you an example, that turbine was producing 200 watts. It's 1.5 meter by 1.5 meter. Since we moved, and we just had the wind turbine, we were using out-of-the-shelf controllers. Once we moved to the United States, we developed the fourth and the fifth generation. The fifth is the one that we have right now, that for the same price, same size, generates 600 watts, so 3x more power.
When you say generates 600 watts or generates 200 watts, is that in a day? Is that in an hour?
Instant power.
Instant power.
Yeah.
Forgive my ignorance here, but what does that mean? How does that translate to an average American? Like, how many watts do I use in a day?
You use kilowatt hours, right? Mm-hmm. One is power measurement, the other one it's energy. You use energy. That's what it's kilowatt hours a year. That's the measurement. What you pay at the end of the month on the bill is kilowatt hours. You can translate a kilowatt instant power to kilowatt hours. But just to give you an example, for example, we have two models right now. The small one produces up to 10 kilowatt hours a day. The large one produces up to 50 kilowatt hours a day. The average consumption in the United States is 30 kilowatt hours a day. One of the things that we have to do here in the United States is improve the energy efficiency. Things have to be more efficient.
As a society, we need to improve our energy efficiency.
Yeah. Just to give an example, the same size and medium-sized family in Europe or Latin America consume 9 kilowatt hours a day.
Really?
Yeah.
Where's all the waste coming from? What are we doing here?
AC, lighting. How many lights you have here on? You need all of them? Probably there are a lot of other lights on the building that are on. Nobody's using them, right?
Yeah. So your larger model right now for our inefficient use of power could still take care of the average American's use of power using that unit.
Yeah. The good thing is that our controller is working on that too, right? So once you connect our turbine, you are not only generating clean energy, you are also improving your energy efficiency. At the beginning, the system will let you know when if you are spending a lot of energy, but next generations, that hardware is already there, but we're working on firmware upgrades, will just manage your system by itself.
We're talking about the turbines of
Semtive,
which to my understanding is a product of Semtive, the company. Tell us what Semtive, the company, is about and what the breadth of your products are.
Our first product was the wind turbine, right? We started with that. I have an issue with the start and I started, sorry, it's one of my strokes. And being a Porteña and pronounce a lot of SH, and it's tough for me to change that.
You want to go in Spanish for a bit and come back, you just let us know, all right?
It's about an hour, right? Yeah. We started working on the wind turbine with the objective to democratize the access to energy. We know that we have two options, to be a niche product or to change the industry. And if you want to change an industry, you have to know the name of the game. And in the energy, it's cost per kilowatt hour. That's all. People can say it about a lot of things, but it's cost per kilowatt hour. And I learned that in Germany some years ago when they invited us to the World Wind Energy exhibition. And I realized that even in clean energy, people were only focused on the cost of generation of the units and not the environmental impact of those units. They were having huge environmental impact and nobody cares about it, right? We want to change that. So our first product and R&D, everything was focused on creating affordable energy. So somebody in Buenos Aires, in Palo Alto, or in Mozambique can use the same turbine to generate affordable energy, right? And with the same product. That was important for us. From there, we were always working on three main pillars that are the pillars of the company since the first day of the creation. The first one is cost efficiency. We were aiming to democratize access to energy, so we have to keep a really low price point. Second one is the environmental one. We are generating clean energy, but the turbine itself is 95% recyclable too, and that's really important for us. Otherwise, we will never be able to sleep comfortable if we know that we are creating some impact too. And the third one is the social, what we call social impact. Social impact for us is important for different reasons. And what it means is that we are manufacturing the units in the region where we sell them. That's important first for the environment because we are reducing the carbon footprint during shipment of the units. Secondly, we reduce custom fees, so we can keep a really low price point. And third is that we generate local jobs. People there will manufacture our turbines and controllers will install them and maintain them. So at the end, we are creating healthy customers for the future, right? People that will be able to afford more units.
Are those three pillars ever at odds with each other? Like, do renewable energy, renewable products cost more than like non-renewable products?
Actually, yeah, it's more expensive. We can save some money on using different materials. But for us, it's important to always have a commitment on all of them, right? We can manufacture abroad from lower prices too, but that's not what we want to have a sustainable company in the future.
So those two last pillars feel more mission driven, and the third one, or the first one, feels to me like it takes a little bit of a backseat if those two last ones aren't.
No, actually we use the three of them, and what we do is try to improve the processes, right? For example, for us, what's really difficult to manufacture, let's say in the United States, have a product that manufactured in the United States, we have the same price point than something manufactured abroad. And so we redesigned our manufacturing process, and now it's the same. So going back to your question, using those three pillars, we developed these wind turbines. And then we realized that we were not able to transport the electrons that we were generating to the end user. So we started developing our own electronics. And that electronics actually is the one that is disrupting the energy industry. What we are doing with them is merging different sources. We control our turbine, that is our proprietary technology. But apart from that, you can merge any kind of AC or DC input. It can be solar panels, small hydro, even gas generators if it's needed in some locations. You can play with different combinations of them. And also you can add storage devices. We merge everything using a microprocessor and machine learning. So we choose from the best source in each different time of the day. You know, sun is great at noon, but really bad in the evening. The wind turbine is better in the evening. So we can play with both technologies, generating more than 100% of what you need and reducing the size of each array, right? That's help us to keep the price point really low. And apart from that, the controller allows you to do energy P2P. So each controller is talking with another controller, let's say your neighbor, and you can start trading energy with your neighbors.
Do you hook into things that aren't mission driven? So like that controller could theoretically also filter in natural gas or oil or like coal powered energy. I know we don't use that much anymore, but
if it's connected from the grid, right? Not generated inside. It's not that you connect your gas line to our controller, but you can be connected to the grid and use the grid as a buffer. Instead of investing in a new coal plant, you can invest the same amount of installed capacity with our technology. Price will be cheaper. You can have a better LCOE, that is the leverage cost of energy. And with that, you'll produce clean energy in a decentralized way. So your maintenance costs will be lower, your infrastructure costs will be lower. And today, it's not something that will happen tomorrow, right? It will take some years. We have a path there in different stages. We call the 3 stages from the first turbine to conquer the world. And
what's in the middle? It's like the South Park meme.
Yeah, that's a search, right?
This is bro down.
I told you, we have what we have to do today and what we want. Today is the first turbine, then it's conquering the world. Then we have the path that we can share that. It's divided in 3 stages. Nothing will be done tomorrow. This is 50 years, things that we have to do to achieve that. But we have to do something, right, Emil? That's why today we are not saying that we'll replace every coal or nuclear plant or solar farm or wind farm. It will take some years. Some of them are starting to reach their life cycles, so have to be replaced. Instead of investing in a new wind farm, we can replace the same capacity with our distributed solutions.
Are these actively in market? And if so, how many customers do you guys have right now?
We just launched the 5th generation lately last year. So we are ramping up production, shipping units and getting more customers. Today we have to ship 2,000 turbines. We are only 5 guys in the company at this
2,000 per year.
2,000 turbines this year. Okay. Actually, our pipeline is larger than that. We have 5,500 units in our pipeline, but we don't have a commercial department. That's one of the bottlenecks that we are having. We're doing everything by myself and Sofia, that is my wife, that now is the COO, is the one answering the emails there. We are having 1,000 inquiries a month from end users willing to acquire our products.
All residential.
We have everything. We have standalone solutions, people that live off-grid. We have commercial, industrial, residential, telecommunication towers. So they are a huge brand. The good thing is that to all of them, we ship the same turbines, right? Depending where you are installing or plugging them is where it's the final application, or who is the distributor or who is the guy putting that turbine, right? So now one of the customers that we have are directly utility companies or oil and gas companies that are willing to, or they know that in 3 to 5 years, the way that we generate our energy will be completely different. They can't compete today with our 1 cent per kilowatt hour if you are considering that you're signing an agreement for the next 20 years at 5, 6, and we can offer today 1. It's something crazy, right?
For the listeners, can you paint a picture of the size and look of these turbines?
Yeah, the best way to look at them is visiting our webpage, right? We have pictures, everything there, semtive.com, but it's basically 3 blades in a vertical array, like 3 sticks, white painted or gray, if you want not them to be visible.
It cycles around in like a carousel.
Yeah, I also have a video of them.
Oh, it's okay. I've seen it. I just want the listener to understand what it looks like. So it cycles around in like a carousel shape as opposed to a pinwheel.
Yeah, exactly.
That most people are.
Exactly.
And what are the dimensions?
The small one is 5 foot by 5 foot. The large one is 10 by 10, and they are extremely lightweight. You think 10 by 10 is huge, but remember that you put it on your rooftop, right?
When you say 10 by 10, that's the blades, or that's
the whole turbine.
Whole thing?
Yeah, the whole thing there, and it's I think that it's 300 pounds or so, and in kilos it's around 150 kilos. So it's lightweight for your rooftop.
Does that shape just like scale infinitely? Like, could you make that turbine the size of like wind farm turbines?
Theoretically, yes. Practically, no. And I think that some of the companies that tried this technology before us failed because of that, right? They tried to increase the dimension of this. The vertical axis has a lot of advantages. It's completely noiseless. That's great for urban areas. It takes the wind from any direction, so you don't have to orientate the turbine. So it's great for turbulent conditions that you can find in urban areas. but have some bad things too, right? The first one is that the turbine works at lower RPMs, so you need a larger magnet size, and that means that it's more expensive. Then how the system works and how the whole turbine works makes good for small dimensions, but when you scale that up, you still need a huge surface, right, to install them, and a lot of materials to support the structure. So horizontal axis, that is the 3 blades turbines, like the ones you imagine when you think about a wind turbine, start becoming more efficient. And when you have really higher wind speed conditions, those designs are more efficient than the vertical turbines. That's why we keep our solutions for the centralized applications. And today we can install the same amount of capacity for probably half of the cost of one of the larger turbines.
I'm a little ignorant on how energy works. So if this thing is generating 10 kilowatt hours or 50 kilowatt hours, do I have to use that today, or how long can that be stored?
Well, you can use any kind of storage device, right? Usually, just to give an example, solar generates a couple of hours a day, around 4 or 5 hours a day, with the peak at noon. So you need to store as much energy as possible there, so you can resell that during the day. In an off-grid solution, it's basically the same. You have to store that amount of energy in a huge battery bank. So that's why the solar arrays are so large, because you try to generate as much as possible. If you are connected to the grid, the idea is that you sell energy there and buy that energy later. In an open market model, it's an offer and demand. So at noon, there's nobody at home, so people try to not purchase energy. The price of energy is going down, so if you want to sell that solar energy, it's bad for you. That's why solar merged with storage in the last couple of years, so they can sell that energy later in the evening when it's the most expensive tier, when everybody's going back to their houses, start cooking their meals or doing laundry, whatever. Our turbine works better in the evening because of the differential temperature. In areas where location is or wind is not as stable, usually it's better in the evening. That is the most expensive tier. The good thing about working together is that you can use a couple of solar panels to the amount of energy that you produce at noon, and for the rest of the day, you have the turbine, right? That's the most efficient way to generate electricity using different sources. That's what we are doing right now. You can store that using any kind of device. People think about lithium-ion batteries, right? There are a lot of companies, famous companies doing those kind of batteries. It's great. It's the most efficient way to do that right now, but you also can use fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells. And in other countries, trying to get a lithium-ion battery is almost impossible. So lead-acid batteries are other solution there.
And you're saying now Semtive is in the space of peer-to-peer selling of the energy that maybe I'm generating a surplus of energy personally from my turbine and maybe from my solar panels. Semtive is also helping me sell to my neighbor.
Yeah.
Do they have to be immediately adjacent?
No, actually, well, for example, let's say you have your energy being generated by wind in the evening, sun charged the battery at noon. You are not using the grid, but you are connected with him that is having a party with a lot of wine. Say, right? Suddenly.
Classic Eric.
That sounds pretty great to me.
Yeah, and suddenly you are playing a lot of music, have a lot of lights there, and you need more energy than the one that you are producing there. So your controller will say, guys, I need to purchase 3 more kilowatts. Who is able to sell this? Your controller will communicate with him and will say, I'm available here. I can sell you energy, let's say for 20 cents per kilowatt hour. And the lady next door can say, sorry, I can offer you at 15. Would you like to buy mine? And your system will start trading those electrons and designing and creating an auction, a real-time auction about the electrons. And his system will purchase the most efficient energy for him.
Even if I'm drunk.
It do it by itself. Yeah,
That's
it's
good.
drunk proof.
And you guys, I saw on your website, can generate as low as 2 cents per kilowatt hour.
It's 1 cent per kilowatt hour. We have to renew the video now that you mentioned that.
Does that work if Jay is in a different city than me?
Well, actually, if it's connected, if everything is connected, it can be done. If we work with the utility and the utilities are interconnected, we can do that, actually. Other ways will be local in the microgrid. The most efficient way to do that is doing as close as possible because every time that you transfer the electron from one side to the other, you're having losses.
How many?
The longer you travel, the larger the losses.
How many kilowatt hours have gone through this platform, have been like bought and sold peer-to-peer?
Today it's pilots. As I said, we just start shipping them on December. So
Theoretically, though, that's kind of like an arbitrage for me as an owner of this, right? So I can earn money by having this type of system in place.
it will be an Airbnb of energy, something like that. You'll have the control. You'll decide if you buy your trade or whatever you do. And to track everything there and to be able for you to manage that, we have blockchain. I think that the best use of blockchain really it's energy trade more than crypto, because electrons and energy is still a hardware, right? Have to be managed as a hardware. You need wires to transport them. You need hardware to create them. Everything there, it's using this, even if it's something that you can touch. And I think that for that applications, being able to have something that can track the kilowatts that you are generating and potentially create tokens that you can exchange market value and negotiate with other customers.
But that's kind of predicated on the people around me also have to have the system in place for me to utilize that.
Yeah, but why not? If we are trying to conquer the world, why not?
Eventually, would that get to a point where it's almost commoditized and the auctioning is going to get so close to the cost to produce that it's not even worth it?
It's possible, yeah. The thing is that, and I always said, if something is not worth it, nobody will do it. So you don't need to sell energy. If you're asking energy, it's because have some value for you. Otherwise, your system, if you can always generate more than 100%, you'll never ask for energy from somebody else. So it's free market.
Yeah.
Right.
What blockchain infrastructure are you guys going to use, or are you using?
The system is working today under Ethereum, but what we are doing really we are providing the signature on the kilowatt, and then we provide that information to the end users. Even if we're working and we have our own blockchain structure, we are creating tokens per kilowatt generated, everything there. We are not trading them. First of all, because we need mass to be able to do that. And secondly, because we're working with the utilities that are the ones that are deploying our turbines with the customers. And we can just merge our technology with them if they already have one. The system is nimble, so we can adapt to theirs. So we are not selling the blockchain thing.
I was just curious, how many cities or geographies or grids, or however you want to define the geography, are your customers in?
Today we have inquiries and orders from 87 countries.
87 countries, how many cities is that?
Tons. I don't know. In the United States, basically, I think that we only have one state that we have no orders from. I think that it's Alabama.
So the model of the peer-to-peer is the more you have clustered, the better. But your inbound seems to be broad.
Yeah.
Which, from my view, my seat, it seems like that might be a slower growth movement than if you just focused really hard on Oklahoma City or Austin, or you just picked one market and you just dominated that market. What has been one, is that right? Is my understanding right? And two, if it is right, why has this current model been chosen for expansion?
First of all, we are not selling electricity today. We are selling turbines, units. We are, as I said, democratizing the access to energy. So we are trying to generate affordable energy for everybody without borders. So that's the first reason why we are selling turbines everywhere. For us, it's basically the same, selling a turbine in Austin or in Buenos Aires or in, as I said, in Mozambique or in Shanghai. It's the same turbine to everybody. It's just who will be buying and paying for that unit. The control and how we can trade those units, actually it's something that will require time. We consider that we'll be using that widely in 3 to 5 years.
Okay.
Right now we're focused on the deployment of units.
So then let me pull a question back to the turbine units.
Yeah.
You mentioned localized manufacturing. You're in 87 countries and you like to do localized manufacturing. What is the threshold for entering if you're going to sell one windmill, is it worth it to go into a country?
No, we're doing that by regions, right?
Okay.
We are doing North America, South America, Europe, Africa. That's why I said there are commercial clusters, right? So in Latin America, you don't have to pay fees for the Mercosur countries, the same in North America. So we are manufacturing them by region, usually in the larger market in each region.
Are you using toll houses, or are you guys setting up your own manufacturing?
No, we have contract manufacturers. Actually, we have also an agreement with probably the larger contract manufacturer in the world. And the only requirement that we ask is to manufacture in each facility in each region, right?
How dangerous is it to try to disrupt such an old industry that has so much power? No pun intended.
That was a good pun.
Everybody think that...
I like
First of
literally
all, we are
picture like
completely crazy.
hitmen. I like picture corporate hitmen saying like, we've got to stop this Nacho guy.
No, actually, the thing is, well, I don't know first. Now I'm scared now. But really, there are a lot of things, right? First of all, we came from a country where you have to hustle. So we don't care about that. I heard somebody saying that the only thing that is more dangerous that somebody with infinite resources is somebody that have nothing to lose. We start from nothing. We've been accomplishing one by one things and growing, bootstrapping on the journey. So if we have nothing once again, we'll try to find the reason why we fail and start from scratch. We don't want to destroy somebody's business. We want them to adapt. So that's why we are working with those utilities and oil and gas companies. They know that something will change. Probably in the past, they lost the first wave with solar, some of them, and they realized that if they are not adapting themselves, they saw what happened in other industries like Kodak and other companies, and now they know that even if this is slowly, because it's a huge monster that is the one that is moving, it's gonna happen. There is a guy that manufacture cool cars that start doing these things, and other guy doing another thing, and people is getting conscious about this too, right? They have border limitations too, so for them it's better to work with us than fight against us. And we're having great relations with them. What we're offering is to keep their business model, but the way that they are keeping those business model, it's completely different, right? Instead of putting holes in the ground to extract fossil fuel to burn them to generate electricity, they will still sell those electrons to the customer, but those electrons will be generated in a conscious way with recyclable materials, and the business model still will be the same.
What's the price of one of these?
Yeah, the website said $3,100 for the S model and $6,400 for the M.
Yeah, those are MSRPs, right? Then
Yes.
you have discounts and distributor prices. And
What other costs come along with that pricing? Is there an installation cost that's on top of that? Are there other costs?
usually the installer charge you for the installation, and probably if you need a permit there in United States, roughly it's $100 to $1,000 above that price. To that price in United States, that is the most expensive way. As I said, those are MSRPs. Then you have distributor discounts and everything. You have to add a 30% tax refund to that.
That's what I was just going to ask. So I remember one of my dad's clients was looking at putting a horizontal windmill on one of his properties because he lives out in the country, and there was some tax refund. Can you talk a little bit more to that?
Yes, not a lot because it's really new. It's something new for us. It used to be, you have different things. One is called PTC and the other one is ITC. Those are two different ways to do this. Now there is a new regulation. The federal law applies the ITCs, the ITC that are investment tax credit to the small wind turbines. I think that was late last year. So now we can have access to 30% tax refund or rebates. That was what made the solar industry bloom, right?
What's the formula to calculate cost per kilowatt hour? I understand kilowatt hours on the bottom, cost is on the top, but is cost per year, is cost per what?
Yeah, actually, we are estimating that considering the generation of the turbine and the cost of the electricity. The amortization of the amount of money that you invest on that system, considering 20 years that it's a conventional PPA. It's when you are developing a wind farm, you consider that PPA to get your LCOE. From there, if you are trying to calculate and estimate your ROI, that depends on your wind speeds and the cost of the electricity in your area. So it's a different number. That's why we don't provide a really accurate ROI there, because we need a lot of other information that depends on your location. But will vary from 2 years to 7 years, worst case scenario, without those incentives and really low cost of kilowatt.
Is the lifespan 20 years or is the tax accounting 20 years?
The tax.
Or both?
The tax. No, actually the lifespan, I can say this without having liability issues, is more than 40 years. Actually, it's one of the good things about the technology. We installed the first turbine in Argentina 10 years ago and still is working there. We don't even clean it in 10 years. So yeah, it's no problem.
Do you like bolt this to the roof? How does it stay down if it's
No,
so
you
lightweight?
have, well, we have different applications and different ways to install this. You can put it on a standalone pole in your backyard if you don't want to put it on your rooftop. There are different mounting systems that you can use the beams to install that. There is a side mounting system. That depends on the installation side, but that's more the installers today. We are developing our own mounting systems, but we are a limited size company, so we can't do everything at the same time. Right?
You said your bottleneck is kind of like the manufacturing of these units and getting them out to market. Probably a pretty capital intensive business to manufacture take the orders and manufacture them, ship out. Is that what's the biggest hindrance to growth right now?
Not really, because first of all, we have a really small production time. So customers are used to pay or are willing to pay upfront for these units. So there is not a huge deal to have working capital. Our main challenge today is that we are 5 guys in the company. As I said, doing manufacturing, sales, and distribution, supply chain, everything there all together. And at the same time, developing the technology, doing a lot of improvements on the software. So it's a huge things that we're trying to do, right?
From what I can see, you've only raised $1 million to date.
No, we're raising right now $1 million in a bridge round.
Okay.
We raised up to date 3.9 million.
So we need to update that because Crunchbase only has it at $1 million, and that's the best.
Yeah,
Crunchbase is constantly failing us.
Constantly.
I used to complete that, but sorry for that, guys.
That's
but
okay.
I realized that was only useful for people that
like us. Yeah, you just threw us right to the curb.
nobody writing checks.
So why not just hire more people?
We are in that process. That's why we are raising this bridge. As I said, we have a lot of orders to fulfill, so we need to get more people and be profitable by Q3 this year and raise a B round with one of the larger partners that we are already working on the due diligence process with them. Those companies are huge energy companies. Mostly of them are oil and gas or utilities, national utilities. The thing is that their minimum ticket size today is the evaluation of our company. I don't want to say buy right now. Mm-hmm. That's why we need to scale up the size of the company, and that's why we are raising this bridge that help us to grow. Unfortunately, I don't know why, but people is asking for something called salary by the end of the month. So I can't get them on board if I'm not paying them this capitalism. So,
but you couldn't why not just pre-sell the heck out of this and use that as runway?
We have a pre-order, right, that people pay up from just a couple of bucks, but really we need to finish the certification, and that we are working on those certifications. By the way, we are not only certifying the control, we are also certifying the turbine, right? We want to show the customer that what we said is true and it's real and performance is there and everything there. That first of all is expensive and it takes time, and you go back and forth a lot of time with those certifications. More if you are only 5 guys that have to fill all the forms. So we don't want to take money for people that we don't know when we'll be able to ship those units for that application with the certification and everything, right? Now we are doing the pilots that we don't need the end certification, and the units that we are shipping are on locations and in markets where we don't need the certification done. It's just to have compliance with the certification.
So normally we ask something about the total addressable market, but in energy, I'm so sure that it's just really big that I'm not really interested in that question. Instead, I'm interested in your view of where you think wind energy as a percentage of total energy production will be in your 50-year plan.
That's a tough question. Today, wind is the larger way to generate renewable energy, right? A lot of people that just focus on the United States, around 10% is generated by renewable sources. From that, 8% is wind, right? Everybody think about solar only, but those are the cold numbers. I think that the numbers will be like that, right? Because of limitations that one or the other has, and efficiencies and other ways. Still, both will be useful, and you need both of them to be able to generate 100. The goal is to start replacing some technologies with other technologies, right? And this doesn't mean that people will lose their jobs. They will move their jobs from doing one thing to do the other. Adapt your industry to move forward with the future. So I'm thinking about probably 50 to 70% will be wind. The rest will be other sources, at least in the decentralized part, right? You will have hydro or other sources. But still, I think that hydro still have some environmental impact, right? You have to flood some areas and you have to transport that energy. Maintenance is extensive. You have a lot of losses, 30 to 40% losses on transportation. You need substations and transformers and a lot of things there, right? So we're trying to avoid that part. Not going to happen in 10 years, 15 years, but probably in 50 and more. And hopefully we can do different sources. Today we have this turbine. We don't know what we are having in 10, 15 years. Hopefully we have something like this phone that you can just get into your house, plug it, and produce 100% of the energy in your house. You put in your car and produce the 100% of the energy in your house. We're aiming to manufacture something like that will be a power cell, or I don't know how cool name you can use it.
Power cell is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's something like transformers, right?
Yeah.
But we don't know how to do it yet. Today we have the wind turbine.
Yeah.
We'll try to figure out how to manufacture this someday in the future.
What brought you guys to Austin from Sunnyvale?
There are a lot of things. The list is long. First of all, the distance from Argentina. We had a long flight. So now we're expecting our first baby with my wife. So we would like to be closer to our family. Secondly, the company is growing. So we need to move somewhere where we are closer to the energy industry. Houston is probably the capital of energy in the world. We need to be closer to them. But because our electronics is based on software and development, we also want to be something nearby to Silicon Valley. We think that Austin is that place. Logistically, we're in the middle of the United States, so we have 3 hours to everywhere. So manufacturing here in Austin or nearby Texas, we can just ship units everywhere. Taxis, another important thing. The weather.
Can't beat that.
We like those season changes. And meat, we love asados and barbecues. So it's another good reason for me.
I was like, did he say meat? I think he said meat.
Yeah. For an Argentinian, that's extremely important.
Yeah.
And then we have a UT that is a great source of talent. And now people know who we are. So we don't need to be in Silicon Valley. We have companies from Japan, from Europe, from everywhere in the world coming to see us. So it's not necessary for us to be there. We developed in the Valley a great group of advisors and people in the decentralized energy industry. So now that we are here, we still have our guys working from there. We still have our office there, and we have a turbine working at NASA Ames. So we still have our flags.
This has been awesome. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us. If people want to learn more about you or about Semtive, where should they go after the show?
Semtive.com. They can send us an email. There we'll respond, or look for me at LinkedIn, or not a Crunchbase.
Not Crunchbase.
Not that one.
Not Crunchbase. How quickly would I be able to get a turbine if I wanted to buy one? Just theoretically, if someone from the show, maybe, but if someone as a listener, if I came in, like, what's that turnaround?
Well, to end users, what we are doing is we're expecting to have the certification done before being able to ship that to end users at those price lists. Meanwhile, we are contacting them with distributors, that the distributor is working on pilots applications. So we can install them working on pilots, but that will depend on them. We are ramping up our production, so it will be month or month and a half.
Cool.
Till you will be able to purchase them on Home Depot and Walmart and install that by your weekend project. Right?
Awesome. Thanks for taking the time.
Thank you very much.
All right, Jay, we just spoke with Nacho. Man, what a name. Love the nickname that you embrace as your real name, you know?
Nacho, real name.
It's Nacho, real name. That was one of your best ones yet. When I think about clean tech or green tech, the biggest thing that pops into my mind is policy and law. And the business itself makes sense, but how does it fit into this kind of legislative space? Do you have any, insight into that?
I don't, but I did think about one of the smartest guys I know who happens to be my cousin, Benjamin Stafford. Benjamin is a director of policy and public affairs for Clean Energy Economy Minnesota. He serves as an advocate and liaison to key industry stakeholders, elected officials, community leaders, and policymakers. He works with member companies and stakeholders to develop and implement strategies to ensure SEAM's organizational interests are advanced in legislation and regulatory policy work. Benjamin has had years and years of experience in the clean energy sector, both with Clean Energy Economy Minnesota and a couple other organizations before that. So I thought it'd be a good idea to call him in and give us some more perspective from the policy side of things. So we'll get into that short interview with Benjamin right now. Benjamin, welcome to the show.
Thanks. Glad to be here.
Could you take us on a bit of a rocket ship through your history in the energy space?
Sure. So I've had sort of a wide and varied career, but I've come to clean energy from a number of angles. Initially starting, I worked for a state regulator that has a lot of influence over what happens on the energy system, and particularly around public utilities, during a time when there was a lot of innovation. And so I ended up being in charge of all our workforce training and development, and then just ended up knowing the industry as it changed. And it was kind of an interesting experience. And then moved out of sort of the workforce side and into the full-time policy gig. Started doing public policy where sort of business and energy met at the time when there was a lot of investment going on in what was at the time known as smart grid, which I think now we just refer to as the modern grid. And that's, in essence, a whole bunch of innovation coming on to the most elaborate engineering system we've ever known, our power grid. And figuring out what kinds of business and regulation and public policy sort of worms we were opening up by inviting in this not necessarily disruption, but evolution in how we looked at our electricity system. So I sort of started in more of a state regulator role in a state, Ohio, which had requirements for both understanding how utility business models would operate in a more clean energy future, and a specific requirement to invite a lot of competitive choices, which meant, in some respect, disruption. So we were this really unique sort of policy and business environment, and having that time at formative your career was interesting. Left that for a couple years to go back to academia. So I was pursuing a PhD here at the University of Minnesota in Minneapolis, and was actually looking at workforce psychology, which has nothing to do with this, but got pulled into some research with the Public Policy Institute here at the university, looking at energy markets from my past history. Ended up doing 4 years of research and publishing on how big energy systems, think about this, like the highway system for clean energy, is absorbing new technology. So it was kind of, I used to sort of describe this as the social side of electrons, which is basically you have new tech, you put it on the grid. The unsexy part of this world is you have to go through a lot of meetings, and people need to digest this technology and how it works. So never really left the field, had a great time in academia, but ultimately decided it wasn't the best fit in the world, went back into the clean energy industry and was working for a trade association. So that took me to Washington, D.C., and was working with a trade association that was in 27 states, and looked across a lot of different business models, a lot of different business issues, a lot of different rules, regulations, public policies, and how all this stuff was working together. Did that for a little bit, did some high line technical consulting after that, and then I'm back and sort of just in Minnesota, sort of evolving the clean energy sector here. So that's a whirlwind, and there's some grad degrees and a bunch of other acronyms involved in that, but that's sort of the journey. Started, and candidly, Jay and Eric, I started this, and I said to my colleagues in the regulatory field that this is way too arcane. I'm not that interested in this. There's no way anyone cares about this. I have never been more wrong and more thankful for it. It's a great place to be. There's a boatload of investment here and a lot of opportunity for clean energy business.
What's changed the most? You've been around this space for a while. What's changed the most since you first entered, besides you? I'm guessing you changed a lot.
Yes, it's been an identity thing. So when we first started this was sort of all theoretical. In the early 2000s, there were all these states that are experimenting with, like, what do we need to do for clean energy for a lot of reasons. And it starts often with state policy and then flows down to business opportunities. And there are, I think now 29 states and a couple territories in the US that have some sort of renewable portfolio standard. And all of this was like, let's just point in a direction of clean energy and see if it works. And now we're like, sitting at a point where We know it works, and we're wrangling with real business problems. It's no longer theoretical. This technology's proven out. The amount of technology that has come onto the grid in the last, I'd say, I've been around about 15 years, is far beyond what we could have expected. It was this sort of theoretical principle of clean energy, and now we're at the point of like an industrial Internet of Things for energy, and it's an entirely different discussion.
What are the pillars? You keep on mentioning the technology and how it's evolved. What are the pillars of clean energy from that technological lens?
Well, let me answer it in a little bit nuanced way and see if it makes sense to you. I think it starts with a goal. So states have done a mix of whether they have mandates for particular technologies that end up being the anchor tenets of what clean energy means in that state, and therefore in that market for businesses. And they've varied from state to state on what they define as, quote, clean energy, unquote. And it sort of started there, and now we're at an era where it's more like we have a just overarching carbon goal or clean energy goal, and we're agnostic about technology, and that invites a lot of new technology in. I think what's core to all this is essentially the communications layer that's being added onto the grid. Is when you start to have a grid that understands itself in much more detail. And by the way, if you understood how little the grid understands itself, you would be disturbed and you'd be surprised how often your lights are on. But when you start to have much more system awareness, and there's no one that's building a system, a energy or utility system that isn't aware now or doesn't provide a lot of data. Once you have that data, you can see much more fine-grained how technologies help or hinder systems, how there's business opportunity, where these devices could best be placed on the grid to add value, et cetera. The one other piece I would put into this too is we've got policy, we've got technology. We've also got an unreal amount of demand for clean energy that we didn't necessarily have before. On the commercial side, there are 73, I think maybe now 74 out of the Fortune 100 companies have some sort of commitment to a clean energy goal, target, et cetera, that is deeply embedded in their sustainability plan. And that's getting up in the mid 40s, almost 50% of the Fortune 500. This is not exactly a bastion of anti-capitalist thought here. So we've got communications policy and demand that are all driving in a very clear direction. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So how much, there are entire cities, states, countries that are built on energy and the old industry of energy. How much do the existing powers try to derail clean energy solutions? Like how much I assume there's a lot of policy and lobbying that happens in that industry.
Whew, that is a full-time employment act for me, Jay. Yes, you're right. There are incumbent interests that have long had influence in this general field. Some of them make the national news, like you would see on the news on a day-to-day basis about X technology company that has some issue or is in with the president or whatever it may be. There's also sort of embedded interests in the business model of how we've delivered energy. So the energy and utility space is full of old interests, and that doesn't necessarily mean they're bad or good. They've just been there for a while and they're used to things operating a certain way. So a number of these technologies and a number of those trends I was talking about in policy, technology, and consumer demand have really forced them to look at business models they never had to even think about before. So that's posed a lot of challenges. And there is always interest in disruption, and this from the literature, that incumbents have a tough time with that. But they vary on that. In my state, Minnesota, we have a public utility that is committed to going 100% carbon free by 2050, and it's one of the largest utilities in the U.S. in Xcel Energy. So they're going to be 80% carbon free by 2030, which if I had told you that 10 years ago, you would have laughed at me. And carbon free by 2050. So there are some incumbents that are embracing the clean energy sort of evolution and running with it. They just see it as inevitable. I think it's a mix there. I think long story long, it's a mix. There are definitely incumbent interests that don't like that they're a lesser part of this discussion, but there's a clear direction. On the policy front, just as a quick note for your listeners today, there are about 18 states that are either have already proposed or are in the process of proposing 100% clean energy legislation. 18 states. That's a massive change. And on the business side, you have to recognize that's a massive opportunity. That's a massive market that did not exist before.
What does that mean? Does that mean these 18 states are going to be 100% carbon free? And then what does 100% carbon free look like?
Yeah, that's what we're trying to figure out. So this legislation is inherently complex, but it has huge impacts on the business community and what investment will come forward. The states generally are moving towards low carbon to no carbon. So there's a clear direction there, independent of whether it's 100% carbon free or they're just calling it clean energy and they define it a different way. They're all moving, no matter what the percentage, in that direction. So I think that we're seeing clear movement towards some definition of clean that is clearly oriented around carbon. State by state, there will be variance in what technologies are included in that portfolio of solutions. Some states lean more towards having a defined list. Others don't have a defined list per se, but are clearly looking at carbon emissions, and that's where they put their foot down, and they have definitive dates. So varies. They're all in the same direction.
So in the case of our guest today, Ignacio from Semtive, he has a technology that he's commercialized and is selling both direct to consumer and commercially. What inherent risks exist for a business model like that in the energy space?
You already hinted at one, but I think in a different way than you may have realized, the incumbent interest. The model, as I understand from Semtive, is largely around this concept in industry we call distributed energy resources. So this is in stark contrast to the long-standing business model of a public utility, which was usually huge investments in single plants that are in one place, big wires that take that from place A to place B to our homes. When you start putting this on customers' property, be they commercial, residential, wherever, you're distributing energy resources elsewhere. And this alters the entire business model of the utilities. And I think there are opportunities for distributed energy resource model under a lot of different regulations and rules and regimes. And in state A, that company that has these solutions may work very closely with the utility and provide solutions to them, and they may be a major customer for them. In state B, they may be clearly adversaries. The utility business model may not agree with this kind of a business model. And figuring out from state to state what that looks like is a challenge. So, where are you going to grow your market and what particular market opportunities you're going to have are tough choices. Even when you see all this clear direction of clean energy, what it looks like in state A and state B for these business models may be fundamentally different.
Being from Ohio, there was something that happened several years ago, I remember, where they're trying to bring tall vertical windmills, kind of the standard style windmills, to some area of Ohio. And in some places it was shot down because it was like higher than the churches. This has nothing to do with actual utility. And that was just a secondary risk that was in play here with this technology. Are there other risks like that? Or like how serious is that risk? Some like cosmetic risk?
Well, so some of it's siting, what they call utility siting, and like where are you going to site these particular technologies? So if you have large fields of wind turbines, there's always an interesting debate back and forth of like this concept of not in my backyard, right? Like I love that it exists, just not in my backyard. And that's, I think, what you had with some of those nuanced county level decisions is that there was some creativity there to find some reasons why not to go forward with certain projects. And this is something that a number of our technologies in the clean energy space face, is some folks are really opposed to why does my neighbor have all these solar panels in their yard? If they're a farmer out here, I'm used to looking at farmland, now I'm seeing solar panels. And that no matter what your technology, you're often facing this. It's not so much in the particular case we're talking about now, but it's a lot of it is also disrupting land use, disrupting what we used to see as your neighbor's yard. Is on the one hand, leave me alone, I'm allowed to do what I want with my land. On the other hand, why do I have to look at it if I'm next door? And this is never going away. In addition, just one more point, Jay, I might make, is there is a considerable amount of lobby from old energy interests that is going and finding places where they can stoke that conflict. There's a lot of interesting laws around the Midwest that are being forwarded by traditional interests to pick these kinds of fights. In net, they tend to be losing right now, but they're definitely present.
And are those fights happening at like a county level, a city level, a state level, national level, all of the above? Like, what layers do I have to fight through as a business?
Yeah, it's all the above. The startups in this space or the new energy technology in this space need to have a good view of what they're walking into when they want to, pursue a market. And it is polycentric, to use the term. Is it is state level, it is city level, it is county level, and those levels don't always work well together. So, for example, Ohio has a history of what they call home rule, which is that law resides sort of closest to where the decision is. So that may be more on the sort of city or county level, whereas some other states don't necessarily see the world that way, and you really settle your problems at the state legislature. Those states may be next door to each other, and then you're just this innovator, and you're like, I have a technology that works. Why am I running into this? So having sort of a clear line of sight of those barriers, I think, is really important.
I want to do a little predicting, future casting. Let's say the world is 100% clean energy in the future. What percentage do you think goes to wind versus solar versus other forms of clean energy?
I think it's going to be interesting state to state what resources you have. So as an example, Minnesota, where I reside, has a lot of really good wind resources, just period. Indiana's the same way. So if you drive up I-65 in Indiana north of Lafayette, where Purdue is, those fields up there are just massive fields of wind turbines. And that's where the wind resource lies. It's not going to surprise either of you that I would say, if I'm doing solar, I might consider Arizona or Nevada because, I don't know, the sun shines there. It's going to vary. I think that increasingly for the big resources like big wind installations, big solar installations, they're working through big regional markets. And those regional markets have sort of two objectives. One, keeping costs low, and two, making sure that power is reliable. In order to have power that's reliable, you have to have a portfolio of all these options. So they're going to want a percentage of wind. They're going to want a percentage of solar. They're going to want energy storage that's coming on is new and exciting. And those debates are going to happen. So looking in the future, it's just really hard to predict that, and it's going to be more locational than anything else. But again, they're balancing those kinds of technology portfolios and where solar works, where wind works over large regions of the nation. I think that you're seeing different growth rates in different technologies right now. So energy storage is like gangbusters right now. Lots of opportunities there. But where that sits and what use cases for energy storage will play out, I think remains to be seen.
So to ask a super on-the-nose question here to round this out, you live in this industry. I
Correct.
sent you ahead of time the website of Semtive just so you could get a first take on it. Did you have any initial reactions to the technology?
Sure. I mean, the technology itself, like I get that it's viable, it's plug and play. There's been a lot of work, and folks actually like myself were working in what we call interoperability, which basically means plug and play. Is so you have these technologies, you can hook them to your systems, and you know they work a certain way, but they're going to affect the system they are already plugged into. So if I put one of these resources on my house or business, it's going to then interact with the electric grid in ways that it didn't before, and that doesn't go unnoticed. So figuring out what that looks like and whether at that point you're a partner with the business or you partner with a homeowner, what's their level of sophistication with working with the incumbent energy company or utility who has the obligation to run their system reliably. So you plug this onto your system, how does that change how their system operates? You need to have that kind of mapped up pretty quickly. In a general sense, the residential sector doesn't have as high sophistication. They've done pretty well with solar panels. There's a lot of solar on houses, et cetera. And I think there's some institutional learning there. So I'd encourage the folks to go talk to folks in that industry and say, how did you tackle these business problems, et cetera. On the commercial side, there's tons of commercial demand. Commercial customers would be very interested in something like this. Commercial sector varies in terms of its sophistication with how it interacts with its other energy providers. Company A likes to sort of be separate from the grid operator. Company B has a very close relationship with them and may not understand what they're getting into. So there's a lot of variance there. Like it's an interesting thing. I'm around distributed energy resources all the time. I'd say there's probably, at least initially for this type of technology, and ask around, I'm a sample size of one, probably more commercial application, at least initially. Residential is just a tough market to get into. There's a lot of grassroots work that has to be done there, and that takes a lot of time. And it depends on where you are in your business cycle, whether you have that time to spend. Additionally, you're going to have a lot of local resources to build that residential market, which is you're going to have to buy. You can't make those. odds are you're not living in those communities. Building that means you got to spend money to get somebody local to advocate for you. That, depending where you are in your sort of funding system, can be really a challenging place to start. Commercial sector has massive appetite for distributed energy resources and varying sophistication. That's sort of an initial reaction. I think also what operations will these technologies serve? Do you pair this with a storage option? So you've got wind that's blowing, and do you then match this with storage to make it sort of more stable for the commercial business, because they have high power quality needs? You have to think through those things. So a myriad of sort of market opportunities there. There's a level of sophistication there that's going to need to push this. And again, distributed energy resources represent disruption to a lot of folks. They also represent opportunity to another. Understanding how and where your customers are with that is going to be a challenge.
Awesome. Benjamin, thanks for being on the show.
Absolutely. And if there's more questions going forward, happy to keep talking with you. It's exciting to see what's happening in this industry. Just as one last quick note, and there's going to be, I think the International Energy Agency, if I'm not mistaken, said there's going to be something like $2.1 trillion of energy infrastructure worldwide in the next sort of 10 years. And there's a lot of sort of regulators and policymakers that are having heartburn about that. As a business guy, I see that as a boatload of opportunity. I mean, that is a massive market opportunity. It's not heartburn. It is, oh my, this is opening up. We need more innovation in this space. We need all kinds of business models. The last thing I'd say is be willing to learn, because we're all going to be right and wrong about this. This is an evolution as well as a revolution. There's going to be a lot of problems and opportunities.
All right, Eric, now we have background from both Nacho and Benjamin. Where do you want to start here?
Let's start where we usually start on Upside. Let's start with the founder. Little bit of a different personality than we're used to on the podcast.
We've never had an Argentinian. That is very new. He had a very laid back, let's say laid back presence in the interview. Kind of fun.
Yeah, a laid back personality, but you could tell that there was like this level of persistence in what he was doing that kind of threaded through his classes in undergrad, his story where he spent 4 years bootstrapping a prototype and 3 to 4 years flying to San Francisco from Argentina. I mean, really, he spent a lot of time into this company and this idea.
There was a very clear sense of, I'm going to do this. And if you get in my way, you're going to regret it. And I'm not going to worry about it because I have nothing to lose. I'm going to do this. He even said, that quote of, the only thing more dangerous than somebody with infinite resources is somebody with nothing to lose. And he said, if this fails, we'll come back and try it again. So that's a type of tenacity and resilience that I think you need in a founder to do something, especially in a regulated industry with a lot of incumbent interests with deep pockets who, as Benjamin said, are actively lobbying the energy industry. So I think he has the right mental toughness to attack this type of challenge.
Right. And he's also thinking about it in such a long view. It's like, all right, what do I need to do today? And where are we going to be in 50 years? That's just like the immediacy plus the long-term vision kind of summed up.
Eric, you've spent a lot more time in blockchain than I have. And it seems like in the technology culture, there's been a swinging of the pendulum in terms of how excited people are to talk about blockchain application. This has a blockchain application in the peer-to-peer nature of the grid. Where do you currently stand on blockchain technology and your level of excitement when it comes to new startup opportunities in the space?
So 2 separate questions there. 1, how do I feel about this as a blockchain technology? And 2, how do I generally feel? I guess I'll start with how I generally feel, because I think that guides a lot of how I feel about this in terms of the application. I feel blockchain technology has a lot of great use cases. I think that there are certain networks that make a lot of sense for a lot of things. There are a lot that make no sense right now. I think one indicator of whether or not something is a blockchain application or someone is trying to ride the hype train is how long into a conversation you go before they mention the word blockchain. And I don't think we hit blockchain until we hit like minute 30 plus of this interview when we were talking about the connector. So For this application, I feel that the technology itself could definitely work. It's peer-to-peer. It makes sense. It kind of is all the things that blockchain does. It secures identity. It allows for transfer of funds through tokenization. I don't know that Ethereum's the right choice, but to be honest with you, I don't have the deepest technical understanding there. So maybe it's just the easiest to build on right now for them. But I think that it is such a small component of what they're doing that to me it's okay, they're using a new technology while using a ton of new technologies. It's no different than if someone said, oh yeah, we're building this product and it does all of these things, and part of the way we build that product uses machine learning. It's nice that they're thinking futuristically, but it doesn't like swing the needle for me as like, oh, this is the next X, Y, or Z.
So you're saying you would want to look through the lens of this business as it is today, as a business that is a wind turbine clean energy business, and not think about the peer-to-peer power grid aspect of it.
No, I wouldn't say that at all. I think the exponential value is in the peer-to-peer side of things. I just don't think the underlying technology is that meaningful. I think the idea of the technology is more meaningful than the actual underlying technology, because it's all predicated on this idea of, can you get this connector and these turbines in enough yards? And then once you get in enough yards, if your Ethereum-based technology doesn't really work, you're just going to pivot to a Hyperledger fabric or to a different blockchain technology, or off and onto like just some database. And I don't think they'll do that last one, but the idea of, oh, the blockchain technology is like the key to the peer-to-peer network, to me isn't like super compelling.
This is where I got a little bit iffy, because the peer-to-peer side of things seems like it's mostly geared towards a future where residential homes are all using this technology, and the peer-to-peer is between residential homes, buying, storing, selling energy. And what we heard from Benjamin was the quickest route to market for a technology like this, where there's the biggest appetite right now, is in the commercial space. And so as I'm looking at this, I'm thinking about Nacho's strategy, because right now, you know, they've shipped about 2,000 turbines this year. They have a back order of about 5,500. They're in 80 different countries, all over the place. A point you made in the interview as well, peer-to-peer makes the most sense when you have kind of a concentration of people on the grid. So I'm still a little fuzzy on the go-to-market and distribution strategy, and whether we're targeting the residential or the commercial side of things first. Because given what I'm hearing from Ben, of course, you want to talk to more potential customers here in both spaces. But it seems like if I'm an investor, I'm looking at this and saying, it seems like the lower hanging fruit right now is the commercial market, where there's more appetite, worrying less about the peer-to-peer. I think that's going to be the higher price turbine, because they're probably going to go with the M model, which is twice as expensive as the S model. Nacho can only manufacture so many right now because he has 5 guys. So why not try to spend more time manufacturing the higher priced item? It just seems to me like the commercial route makes the most sense in the immediate term.
Yeah, I don't think I have a strong opinion on commercial versus residential. I think the go-to-market is definitely fuzzy for me as well. I think the peer-to-peer is such a vision that it's like a 30-year vision. And that's hard for us to say, oh, sitting here today, what are we investing in 7 to 10 years down the road? One thing that I will say is that this connector is a pretty genius idea if you can make it super simple for the user to understand. Like, I'm thinking like your Nest thermostat, how that made air conditioning simple, and like, yeah, it changes things when you aren't home and understands things like that. If that could do the same, if you could have next to your Nest thermostat, if you could have a Semtive connector that said essentially, hey, right now you're selling your wind energy and you're buying from the grid because that makes sense, and you're doing it this way, and here's your average price of electricity, and that like played into your whole home system. That's a pretty awesome smart home movement that a lot of this back end, which is the peer-to-peer network and everything, isn't what you will be. If it's going to be successful, it's not going to be someone looking at it and saying, oh, I need to adjust things. It's going to be happening in the background. So he talked about this leveraged cost of electricity and lowering it. If I see a measurable decrease in my leverage cost of electricity as a homeowner or as a commercial enterprise, regardless of if I have the Semtive wind turbine or not, that is a really interesting idea for me.
I love the future vision of the world. You know, Kara Swisher said on her podcast recently, you know, stop making your dating apps, make something that matters. And this type of technology falls squarely into that camp. I love the long-term vision of this, and the version of the world where I am buying and selling my own energy and storing it, and I'm self-sustaining in that way, and I'm sharing with my neighbors, and it's coming through like that. I love that. To your point, it is a longer term vision. So, this is where our lack of experience as, quote, investors kind of shines through. How do we approach something like this that has such a longer term vision than the life of the fund that we will be managing? How do we consider something like that into it?
It almost seems like this is ideal for what we've been learning about, which is family offices. Someone who can think about this vision in terms of 30, 40, 50 years.
Well, and Nacho mentioned that in looking towards a Series B, he was raising a bridge round currently, and looking towards a Series B, those were the large utilities companies that were leading that. They would also be a good suitor for this type of investment. So I think that makes sense.
Right, because they're investing off balance sheet, which is permanent capital, essentially. The idea of this futuristic vision kind of fits really nicely into this story of these three pillars, which are cost efficiency, environmental, and social. One thing that doesn't tell us is, how is this doing financially? So I took a couple of the numbers that he put together, and I want to just kind of get a feel for where we are in terms of size of the business today and not get so lost in the vision of 50 years from now. So he said that they've sold about 2,000 units this year. If you say that the smaller one is 3,100 and the larger one is 6,400, we don't know the product mix, so let's just say it's 50-50. That's going to get you $4,750 as an average price per unit. Multiply that 2,000 times that average unit cost, and you're looking at like $9.5 million in revenue. That's higher than I thought kind of coming into the interview.
Although we should say that $3,100 and $6,400 price points are MSRPs. So what he's actually selling them for is going to be probably far less.
Fair. So what is the typical discount between MSRP and wholesale costs?
I'm going to say 30%.
Okay, so if we cut that 30%, we're still looking at $6 million. Still higher than I thought. I thought these would be I thought there would be less revenue at this point based on how much we talked about the future vision. I found across our podcast interviews that when people focus so much on the vision, it's usually because they don't have a product that is currently turning enough revenue to talk about. And that's not a bad thing. It's because you're still in the discovery stage and you haven't gone to market, or maybe you have gone to market, but it's just like with beta customers. And this is more advanced almost than I was expecting.
Yeah, I wonder what the cash flow is like of this business, because he's raised $3.9 million to date, was raising $1 million bridge round, and that is predominantly to help grow the team because there are 5 people making this, and that's their constraint. He said they had a 5,500 order backlog in his pipeline. And if we're looking at that number, how much revenue is that just sitting on the shelf? Or are we guessing that pipeline is already paid?
I don't think it's already paid. My guess would be, because he talked about how it's important that he delivers when people place orders. So I'm guessing he talked about these 1,000 inquiries a month. I'm guessing these are the 1,000 inquiries that are kind of lining up. What percent of those convert? I don't know, but I'm guessing it's a decent percent if he's already shipped 2,000 of them.
Yeah, it seems like manufacturing must be a real constraint, because if you have that type of inbound inquiry and you can turn cash on it, that would help you, not raise a bridge, not have to raise immediately. So there must be some real bottlenecks in the manufacturing side of things, which is a little bit of a shadow for me, because I wonder, what is it about manufacturing that slows down, and how do you get this to a level of scale?
That's how I feel as well. I think it's the decentralized manufacturing network that they're creating, where everything is created regionally, that is probably making this hard. So when you think about large manufacturers, they have teams in all of these regions that are working with the manufacturers and the local distributors to get everything out to the customer. These are 5 people sitting in Austin trying to run a worldwide network of manufacturing and distribution. Because when we asked about the customers, he said, no, they're everywhere. We have people in Asia. We have people in South America. We have people in Europe. It wasn't like, oh, we're just selling to Austin to launch and find this thing. So the breadth just has to be exhausting.
So Eric, all that said, what are you looking for 6 to 18 months from now from Semtive?
Let me see that team size. Let me see if it's growing. Let me see if that increase in team size is shortening that pipeline. Because if it's not, then we have a different problem.
Yep, I was going to say the same thing. I'm looking to see, what does their output look like, whether that's from team size or different manufacturing partners. whether that's from a different distribution strategy where they're honing down and saying we're going to go to these regions first. I want to understand that. I want to, keep a finger on the pulse of how are conversations going with the energy and utility companies here in the United States. Are they making headway? Does it seem like they're going to have a good route to market through regulation in some of these, 18 states that Benjamin mentioned are in the process of creating clean energy legislation right now?
Jay, do you think you could make a functioning prototype of a microphone out of some wires from around your house and a toilet paper roll?
I don't. And when he was talking about toilet paper rolls, I just thought back to when I was a kid. My dad always referred to those things as dirters.
Dirters?
Dirters. He's like, oh, look at this dirter. Like inside wrapping paper or inside toilet paper, it was just a dirter. So it's like, no, I don't think I could make a functioning clean energy wind turbine out of a dirter.
Listeners, if you have any funny names for toilet paper rolls like dirters or warpers or who knows what, shoot us a tweet at Upside FM. If you have any thoughts on this episode, you can also tweet at us at Upside FM. Or if you have something a little more long form, send us a note at hello@upside.fm.
That's all for this week. Thanks for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's guest, so shoot us an email at hello@upside.fm or find us on Twitter at UpsideFM. We'll be back here next week at the same time talking to another founder in our quest to find upside outside of Silicon Valley. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please email us or find us on Twitter and let us know. And if you love our show, please leave us a review on iTunes. That goes a long way in helping us spread the word and continue to help bring high-quality guests to the show. Eric and I decided there were a couple things we wanted to share with you at the end of the podcast, and so here we go. Eric Hornung and Jay Klaus are the founding parties of the Upside podcast. At the time of this recording, we do not own equity or other financial interest in the companies which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own opinion and do not reflect the opinions of Duff & Phelps LLC and its affiliates, Unreal Collective LLC and its affiliates, or any entity which employ us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. We have not considered your specific financial situation nor provided any investment advice on this show. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.
Never mind. Bro, that can't be matched. I'm lighting it on fire. Used to run victory laps. And still, I'm not even tired. It's all about the timing, yeah, that's what they say. Well, I'ma keep on rhyming, find a way and get it.